joy, and begun to shout whoop jamboree-hoo, and Tom says, and we can keep on coming back and fetching sand, and coming back and fetching more sand, and just keep it a-going till we've carted this whole desert over there and sold it out, and there ain't ever going to be any opposition either, because we'll take out a patent. My goodness, I says, we'll be as rich as creosote, won't we, Tom? Yes, Croesus, you mean. Why, that dervish was hunting in that little hill for the treasures of the earth, and didn't know he was walking over the real ones for 1,000 miles. He was blinder than he made the driver.
Mars Tom, how much is we going to be worth?
Well, I don't know yet. It's got to be ciphered, and it ain't the easiest job to do, either, because it's over 4,000,000 square miles of sand at 10 cents a vial. Jim was awful excited, but this faded it out considerable, and he shook his head and says,
Mars Tom, we can't afford all them vials. A king couldn't. We better not try to take the whole desert, Mars Tom. The vials gwine to bust us, sho.
Tom's excitement died out, too, now, and I reckoned it was on account of the vials, but it wasn't. He set there thinking, and got bluer and bluer, and at last he says, Boys, it won't work. We got to give it up. Why, Tom?
On account of the duties.
I couldn't make nothing out of that, neither could Jim. I says, What is our duty, Tom? Because if we can't get around it, why can't we just do it? People often has to. But he says, Oh, it ain't that kind of duty. The kind I mean is a tax. Whenever you strike a frontier, that's the border of a country, you know, you find a custom house there, and the government officers comes and rummages amongst your things and charges a big tax, which they call a duty, because it's their duty to bust you if they can, and if you don't pay the duty they'll hog your sand. They call it confiscating, but that don't deceive nobody, it's just hogging, and that's all it is. Now if we try to carry this sand home the way we're pointed now, we got to climb fences till we get tired, just frontier after frontier, Egypt, Arabia, Hindustan, and so on, and they'll all whack on a duty, and so you see, easy enough, we can't go that road. Why, Tom, I says, we can sail right over their old frontiers. How are they going to stop us? He looked sorrowful at me and says, very grave, Huck Finn, do you think that would be honest? I hate them kind of interruptions. I never said nothing, and he went on, Well, we're shut off the other way, too. If we go back the way we've come, there's the New York custom house, and that is worse than all of them others put together, on account of the kind of cargo we've got. Why? Well, they can't raise Sahara sand in America, of course, and when they can't raise a thing there, the duty is 1,400,000% on it if you try to fetch it in from where they do raise it. There ain't no sense in that, Tom Sawyer. Who said there was? What do you talk to me like that for, Huck Finn? You wait till I say a thing's got sense in it before you go to accusing me of saying it. All right, consider me crying about it, and sorry. Go on. Jim says,
Mars Tom, do they jam dat duty onto everything we can't raise in America, and don't make no stinction twixt anything?
Yes, that's what they do.
Mars Tom, ain't the blessing of the Lord the most valuable thing dey is?
Yes, it is.
Don't the preacher stand up in the pulpit and call it down on the people?
Yes.
Where do it come from?
From heaven.
Yes, sir, you's just right, deed you is, honey. It come from heaven, and dat's a foreign country. Now den, do they put a tax on dat blessing?
No, they don't.
Course they don't, and so it stand to reason dat you's mistaken, Mars Tom. Dey wouldn't put the tax on poor truck like sand dat everybody hain't bleeged to have, and leave it off'n the best thing dey is, which nobody can't get along without.
Tom Sawyer was stumped. He see Jim had got him where he couldn't budge. He tried to wiggle out by saying they had forgot to put on that tax, but they'd be sure to remember about it next session of Congress, and then they'd put it on, but that was a poor lame come-off, and he knowed it. He said there weren't nothing foreign that weren't taxed but just that one, and so they couldn't be consistent without taxing it, and to be consistent was the first law of politics. So he stuck to it that they'd left it out unintentional, and we'd be certain to do their best to fix it before they got caught and laughed at. But I didn't feel no more interest in such things, as long as we couldn't get our sand through, and it made me low-spirited, and Jim the same. Tom he tried to cheer us up by saying he would think up another speculation for us that would be just as good as this one and better.
but it didn't do no good. We didn't believe there was any as big as this. It was mighty hard. Such a little while ago we was so rich, and could have bought a country and started a kingdom and been celebrated and happy, and now we was so poor and ornery again, and had our sand left on our hands. The sand was looking so lovely before, just like gold and diamonds, and the feel of it was so soft and so silky and nice, but now I couldn't bear the sight of it. It made me sick to look at it, and I knowed I wouldn't ever feel comfortable again till we got shut of it and didn't have it there no more to remind us of what we had been and what we had got degraded down to. The others was feeling the same way about it that I was. I knowed it because they cheered up so the minute I says, "Let's throw this truck overboard." Well, it was going to be work, you know, and pretty solid work, too. So Tom, he divided it up according to fairness and strength. He said me and him would clear out a fifth apiece of the sand, and Jim three-fifths. Jim, he didn't quite like that arrangement. He says, "Course, I's the strongest, and I's willing to do a share accordin', but by jings, you's kind of piling it on to old Jim, Mars Tom, ain't you?" "Well, I didn't think so, Jim, but you try your hand at fixing it, and let's see." So Jim, he reckoned it wouldn't be no more than fair if me and Tom done a tenth apiece. Tom, he turned his back to git room and be private, and then he smole a smile that spread around and covered the whole Sahara to the westward, back to the Atlantic edge of it where we come from. Then he turned round again and said it was a good enough arrangement, and we was satisfied if Jim was. Jim said he was. So then Tom measured off our 2/10 in the bow and left the rest for Jim, and it surprised Jim a good deal to see how much difference there was, and what a raging lot of sand his share come to, and said he was powerful glad now that he had spoke up in time and got the first arrangement altered, for he said that even the way it was now there was more sand than enjoyment in his end of the contract, he believed. Then we laid into it. It was mighty hot work, and tough, so hot we had to move up into cooler weather or we couldn't have stood it. Me and Tom took turn about, and one worked while t'other rested, but there warn't nobody to spell poor old Jim, and he made all that part of Africa damp, he sweated so. We couldn't work good, we was so full of laugh, and Jim he kept fretting and wanting to know what tickled us so, and we had to keep making up things to account for it, and they was pretty poor inventions, but they done well enough. Jim didn't see through them. At last, when we got done, we was most dead, but not with work but with laughing. By and by Jim was most dead too, but it was with work. Then we took turns and spelled him, and he was as thankful as he could be, and would set on the gunwale and swab the sweat and heave and pant and say how good we was to a poor old nigger, and he wouldn't ever forget us. He was always the gratefulest nigger I ever see for any little thing you done for him. He was only nigger outside. Inside he was as white as you be. End of chapter 11.